Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced. If you've been enjoying this series of videos on data on this channel, make sure to hit like and subscribe. But in this video, we're going to do is we're starting sort of a new journey. So in my intro to SQL videos, we introduce the syntax and concepts of SQL using the context of SQLite. But SQL goes way beyond any particular database. It goes into data warehouses, data lakehouses, and data lakehouses are exactly where we're going to continue this journey using a platform called Dremio. Let's just put into context sort of like what Dremio is and what Dremio is for. So Dremio is what's referred to as a data lakehouse platform. Okay, so actually even before we go there, let's just think about like a database. Okay, so in this case here we have a database. And generally the database is going to do three things for you. Okay, it's going to store the data. So it's going to handle storage, which also means optimizing that storage, managing that storage of that data. So in that case, when we store data in SQLite, we didn't have to really think about how the data was stored in SQLite, how it managed that data. It wasn't something we had to think about. Okay, and then it's also going to handle processing. So essentially, like when I run SQL statements, like how does that SQL operate on the data storage? That is all inside the abstraction of the database. So again, all this stuff is happening inside. It's just like one big box, and I have no visibility into how any of these things work. And last, metadata. Okay, oftentimes in order to be able to query, to process those queries faster, you have a layer of metadata between the compute processing and the storage, because I could do something like a count much quicker if I already have that count tracked somewhere in the side and some metadata. Okay, basically data about my data. So all this is kind of abstracted away from me. All I know is that I say, hey, I run my SQL and it just works. Very similarly, you have data warehouses. Okay, and data warehouses up and still today are sort of the main place where a lot of analytics happen once you move data out of the database. Because again, generally we're going to use a database for transactional processing. So again, new users, new members, people uploading a photo, basically people interacting with applications. The database is going to handle that because we're dealing with row-based transactions, and then we'd move the data eventually to a data warehouse for different purposes. And generally in between, you would have, a data lake, which just handles one thing, the storage side of it. Okay, that's the data lake. So it's basically just a big place where you can store data, and it has no opinion on how you access it, how you optimize it. It's just a place to dump data. So this typically would this is always some sort of distributed storage system. When I say distributed, it just means something that can work across multiple computers. So in this case, the typical would be like the Hadoop file system, which was kind of what was the thing that started data lakes. But nowadays, most data lakes, or more and more data lakes, are moving over to what's called object storage. These are going to be things like AWS S3, ADLS, that's Azure Data Lake Storage, Google Cloud Blob Storage. All of those are different like variations on the object storage story. So the idea is that the storage is just the storage. Okay. So then what happens is that how do I handle the metadata to make that table faster? Well, now the metadata gets handled as a separate, distinct layer. Okay. So the metadata, that basically allows, because it's the metadata that allows the processing to understand that the data stored over here is a table. So the problem is the data lake, without some sort of metadata layer, there's no way for tools to know that, hey, these files here and these files there are a table in the same way we'd interact with a table in SQL. So to provide a metadata layer, we're going to lean on another technology called a table format. Okay, And for this series of videos, we're going to focus on a table format called Apache Iceberg. Okay. Now, Iceberg, basically, think of it as like, again, metadata is just data on your data, but it's data on your data that's going to allow a variety of tools to be able, a variety of different processing tools to be able to recognize the tables. So instead of like with a normal database where that database can only see the tables that I have inside that database, or a data warehouse where I can only see the tables I have inside that data warehouse, we'll be able to bring a lot of different processing tools, okay, to bear. Okay, so for the next few videos, we're going to be bringing, so again, processing. We're going to be bringing something called Dremio, okay? And Dremio is one example of a data lakehouse platform, okay, in the sense that you take your data lake, the storage, and then you put something like Dremio on top of your storage that gives you the interface, gives you the SQL engine, gives you the sort of interface to interact with that storage in the same way you would interact with a database, but now they're two separate things. So in that case, I could take that same data lake storage to different data lakehouse platforms and not just be stuck within sort of one tool set and one paradigm. That's the beauty of it. So if later on I want to use a different tool, I don't have to move my data into a new database, into a new data warehouse. I just put a new platform on top of it. So this is sort of like a very new trend in data, and a very exciting one. But essentially this all together is called a data lakehouse. The idea is basically it's like a database or a data warehouse deconstructed. Instead of getting all these different pieces in a box, you have your data lake storage. So now what we're going to be using for our data lake storage is a platform called Minio. Okay, so for our examples here, because we're going to run everything from our laptop. But the idea is that, see, we have, instead of having one database, like before we were using SQLite 3, that like had everything sort of like wrapped all in one wrapper, you have this wrapper, and we're gonna have Minio that's gonna basically store our data files. So Minio is acting as our storage layer where we store the individual data files. And then Apache Iceberg is going to basically be a layer of metadata. Now, we never have to set up Iceberg. Iceberg is just something that happens in the way that our processing layer interacts with our storage. So what's going to happen is that when Dremio creates tables, it's going to automatically create the Iceberg metadata. When we update the tables and query the tables, Dremio knows how to work with the Iceberg format. But since those tables are written using the Iceberg format, later on, if we use other tools like Apache Spark or Apache Flink, they'll be able to understand those same tables. And that's the beauty of Apache Iceberg in table formats. You now have this table that is now portable to different tools that are completely unrelated. Okay, so that's the reason why this is such a cool architecture. Okay, so again, Iceberg is going to be sort of our metadata format. We never have to formally set it up when we're using it with Dremio because Dremio just kind of has it in its DNA. But essentially, when we create a table in Dremio, what we're creating is an Iceberg table. When we're working with tables in Dremio, we're working with Iceberg tables. Okay? And then Minio will be where we store all that. So now that we kind of understand where we're going, what we're going to set up, what you need is you're going to need Docker Desktop to set this up. And we'll set it up in a way that requires you to do minimal amount of code. So if you go to docker.com, you can download Docker Desktop. Just basically go here, click Get Started, and download Docker Desktop. Okay, so if you just look up Docker Desktop, I mean, basically if you just look up here we go, Docker Desktop. Okay, you can then just download it. And it works on all operating systems. You get this cool sort of easy to use software. I have it opened up over here in a second so we can walk through the setup. Okay, essentially what Docker is, Docker allows you to do what's called containerization. A container, the simplest way to think about it is it's an imaginary computer running in your computer. So I can actually have like a whole network of other computers running on my computer. Okay, they're again, to keep it simple, think imaginary computers. Okay. Now these imaginary computers, they're generated from sort of a blueprint on how to create them, which are referred to as images. So images are the blueprints, and then the containers are the imaginary computers we create from those blueprints. So what we need is we're going to need two images, two blueprints to create the two pieces we need. We need one for Minio, our storage layer where we're going to store all our data. And we need another one, Dremio, which is going to be our data lakehouse platform which is going to allow us to interact with that storage in the same way we would interact with a database or a data warehouse, with a nice UI and a nice sort of user feel. Okay, so again, basically, Dremio allows you to kind of create that data warehouse feel right on top of your existing data lake without having to create a third copy of your data in a data warehouse. That's sort of the beauty of it. Okay, so let's go grab those. So you would click here in the search bar and look for Minio. I already have it, but basically what you would want is I think it's just like here, the Bitnami Minio image. Okay, and then you would want Dremio. You would want this one, the Dremio OSS image. So you would just pull that. So pull means to download the image. It might take a moment. I already have them downloaded, so you can see exactly the images I have. It's the Bitnami Minio image and the Dremio OSS image. Okay. Well, once you have those listed under your image, we can then create a container. And the way we create a new container is you click this little play button. Now, first, I'm going to create the Dremio container. Okay, so basically it says, hey, run a new container. Simple as that. Now, what you want to do is set up some settings. And I'll explain why we set up these settings. You always want to name the container, so it's easy to kind of find it later. So I'm just going to call this Dremio. Okay. And then what's going to happen is that we want that container to work on our laptop almost like it's our own laptop. Okay, so that imaginary computer is on a network, and basically it has certain ports that the software running on that computer is operating on or operating from. We want to map those ports to our computer. Okay, so we're referred to as the host computer. So my laptop is the host, and then the container is existing within the host. So what I want to do is map these numbers. So this number here, that's the number in the container. I'm going to map it to that same number on my laptop. So literally, I'm just typing that same number over again. 31010, 32010. And all this means is that Dremio on this image, in this container, is using that number for something. Okay? The only one that's really going to... Oh, why did I just blank out? Okay, let's try that again. 31010. Okay. 32010. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9047. Well, I just erased itself again. Interesting. I wonder why it's doing that. Okay, let's try that one more time. 31010, 32010, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9047. And the only one in particular you want to kind of pay attention to is 9047, because that's the one that maps to where we're going to see Dremio on the internet. Okay, and we'll get back to that. So you'll see what I mean in a moment. But once you have that set up, that's it. Just hit run, and now Dremio is running on your computer. Okay, so it's just going to take a second to start up. Okay, it's getting itself started. Cool. Okay, so that's now getting all started up. And if I click here on containers, I can see that now I have a Dremio container, which I can stop and start whenever I want. Okay, so when I'm not using Dremio, I can pause it by hitting the stop button. And then when I want Dremio back on, I just turn it back on. Okay, so it's literally like having a computer I can turn on and off with software running. Pretty cool. Now we want to start our Minio image for our storage. So I'm going to click this little play button again. Boop. Now here you're going to have a few more settings you want to set. Minio. Okay, notice it has different ports that it exposes. Every image is custom designed. That's not a story for today. Like that goes deeper into how Docker works. But just know that the numbers that I see here are based on the underlying blueprint and how that blueprint is designed. So this blueprint exposes ports 9000 and 9001. So I'm just going to map those to my computer. And generally a lot of blueprints or a lot of these images, they have certain variables I can define to customize how they work. So in this case, I can use them to create a default Minio user, which I need in order to log into Minio. So that's going to be like Minio root user. And how would I know this? I would go look up the image. So there's a website called Docker Hub where you can look up all these different images and blueprints, and you can find, instruction manuals basically. So Minio root user. So we'll just say admin. And then we're going to add another environmental variable. Minio root password, and I want to double check if that's supposed to be user or username. Okay, so that is supposed to be root user. Okay, and then we're going to add a couple more, but the password will be password. Then we're going to have Minio region name. Okay, which will be US East 1. Actually, it should be US East 1. This is just to map to any AWS region. This will be more important when we explore like Apache Spark in a different set of videos. Okay. And then Minio region, also US East 1. Okay, so I set that all up. Again, these two won't matter for the purposes of Dremio, so it won't really matter for today, but that's how it's set up for later on. Okay, and then I hit run. And that's going to start that container. Now that container is starting up. And now what's going to be important is I'm going to want to connect Minio to Dremio. And that's going to require me to know where Minio is relative, where that Minio computer is relative to Dremio. Luckily, Docker Desktop makes this pretty easy to figure out. So if you click over here where it says stats, okay, actually it's inspect where I want to look, inspect, what you do is you can click here on where it says networks. This is going to give you the networking info for that container. Now by default, all your containers in Docker are put on a network called Bridge. You are able to create custom networks. We're not going to get into that. But there is this bridge network that they're all on. So essentially, both of those computers are on this imaginary network called Bridge, which means they have an IP address relative to each other that they can use to talk to each other. Okay, that's going to be the IP address that I have right here. Okay, so we're going to need that a little bit later on, but just so that way you know how to get to it. Okay, so again, that's its IP address on the Bridge network. Okay, if there were other networks, you could see them listed here. It's all the information I might want on this container. So I can see, hey, which ports are being exposed and how they're being mapped, all that cool stuff. I can see all that stuff in here if I'm trying to understand how this container is running currently. Okay, but with that, everything should be started up. Let's go to the browser. And let's first head over to Minio. So that's going to be at localhost. Localhost is the name of your computer. Okay, so basically my computer is localhost. Another name for my computer is 127.0.0.1, but localhost is easier to remember. And then again, we mapped it to port 9001. So if I click there, that's going to take me to Minio. So basically it's operating on my computer on port 9001. So now I can use that username and password that I set up, admin password. And this is my storage layer. So here I can see all my data that is stored. Okay. Basically, the idea is that the way object storage works is that you're going to have a bunch of sort of places where you can store data. They're called buckets. Okay, right now we have no buckets, so we have nowhere to store data. So I can click on buckets and I can create a bucket. Let's create a bucket called, storage. Okay, so we're going to create a storage bucket. Okay, and that'll just basically be where we dump all our data for now. We'll keep it simple. And then I could theoretically even upload stuff from here from Minio because it's just a storage system. It's just basically a place where I can upload data. So I can go here to in the object browser, click on storage and upload files. Okay, so I can go upload. So if I go over here to documents and I go to Excel, I can upload this Excel file. And now that's inside my storage inside that bucket. Okay, so again, this is my data lake, the place where I can store things, and I can literally store any kind of file you can think of. It's a giant distributed hard drive. Okay, now I can't run SQL here. I can't really interact with any data here. It's not really meant for that. This is meant for storage, to be my storage layer. Okay, this could be AWS S3, ADLS, anything. Okay, so what I need is a platform that's going to allow me to interact with my storage layer like I would interact with a data warehouse or a database, and that's where Dremio comes in. Now, Dremio is going to be running on localhost 9047. Okay, so the first time you go to this website, it's going to ask you to set up your admin user. Okay, so we just fill this out. Alex Merced. Alex.Merced. Actually, this time I'll use Alex Merced or data@alexmerced.com. I got lots of email addresses. And then I'll put in a password. Okay, nice secure password. And then here I am into Dremio. So see, I got this nice UI where I can work with my data. Okay, and the cool thing about Dremio is that now I can connect all sorts of different data sources. So if I click here, I can click add source, and there's all sorts of different types of sources I can connect. So I can even connect other databases like Oracle, MySQL, Postgres. I can connect data warehouses like Snowflake. So Dremio not only provides a data lakehouse platform to basically treat my data lake like a data warehouse, but it also offers a data federation or data virtualization platform, which means being able to work with data in multiple places like it is in one place. Okay, so basically Dremio offers you sort of a platform for sort of multiple use cases, which is what makes it so awesome. Okay, and you can even connect to other Dremios. But what we want to do is that Minio is a Amazon S3 compatible storage layer. So anytime you have a S3 compatible source, we use the S3 connector. So I'm going to click Amazon S3. I'm going to give it a name of Minio so we know it's our Minio storage. You're going to use the AWS access key access method, and then we just put in our username, admin, and password. Okay, if this was AWS, you would get like a special access key and secret key, which are like these big long strings of numbers and letters that you could put in there. Now, since Minio is running on our computer, it is not secure. Okay, because again, this is just for education. So you want to uncheck encrypt connection. Okay, and then here in the advanced tab, we're going to enable compatibility mode because we're basically needs to know that we're not using S3, we're using an S3 compatible store. Okay, and then the root path should point to our bucket. So think of the slash as your whole Minio cluster, and then anything after it is the bucket that you're pointing to. So I'm going to point it to my storage bucket. Okay, so that's that. Iceberg is going to be how we want it to write and read tables. Okay, so that's what that is. And then we have a few connection properties we need to set. Okay, this FS3 pass style access. So that's the name, and that needs to be set to true. And then we need to set the endpoint. So this is basically saying, hey, where is my Minio? So this is where that IP address becomes important. So I'm going to head back to Docker. Again, I'm looking at the Minio image. So here I'm looking at my Minio container, and I have the IP address right here. So I'm just going to go grab that IP address. Okay, I'm going to copy that over, head back over here to Dremio and paste that IP address in here. And then I'm going to say, hey, running from port 9000. Okay, so on port 9000 at that IP address, that's where you will find Minio. So far, I haven't written any code. Okay, and then I can go over here, dremio.s3.compat. This just also turns on compatibility mode. So you can hit true, and we are good to go. Okay, so I can hit save, and this should connect, and I should have my source all set up. Okay, and there it is. There, my source is all set up. I can see it there, and again, I can connect to multiple sources. But you see already, I can see that Excel file that we uploaded. Okay, and I can, when you see like data files, I can then tell Dremio to say, hey, going forward, treat that as a table. So in this case, it automatically detects that it's an Excel file. I can actually click extract column names. It'll know that, hey, that first row is supposed to be the column names, and now I'm going to be able to interact with it like a table like this. Okay, and I can hit save, and now I can run a query on that file. So I can click run, and now I can query that file. It's going to go run a query and then show me the results right in here. Okay, which we see right there. So there we have Dremio set up. Basically, we'll continue from here, but now we got our setup for the coming videos. Have a great day and enjoy. You now have a data lakehouse set up on your computer. So you are on the forefront of data engineering.